Good morning, everybody. So today we are going to talk about CQRS, which is a very cool pattern that allows you to scale your reads and writes separately, which is very nice for high-scale applications where your read and write needs are completely different. It does require some additional complexity, but things like Event Bus and commands and queries, we can make it very, very easy in Laravel. So let me just show you this pattern. So yeah, let's get started. So I have a fresh Laravel project here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside of our app project, app folder. Let's call it bus. And well, first of all, I don't think I ever explained what the term actually means. So yeah, it's a command query responsibility segregation, which basically means that we are separating our reads from our writes. And this allows us to scale everything very nicely. If we, for example, need to spawn 5 read databases but only have 1 write database, that's a great solution for that. So let's start by creating our command bus. And Laravel has command bus by default. So this should actually be an interface. So let's just start with that because we don't want our command bus to be dependent on like a special implementation. We just want to use the command bus and what it provides. And our command bus can have like a public function dispatch. Oh, thank you, Copilot. We'll just import that, and we don't have a command yet. I'll probably just disable Copilot for this episode. I started using it recently again to get my mind around it, but I still have very mixed feelings. So let's create a command. For now, it can just be like a dummy class. Let's create a new public function called register, and this will accept an array of like some sort of map. Now, we need to create like some sort of concrete implementation of this command bus. So what I will do is I will create illuminate command bus, because that's what we'll be using by default. And illuminate is just a name of like what Laravel uses internally. And you may or may not know this, but Laravel at some point used to have like a first-party command bus implementation. Now it's hidden behind this dispatcher, and this is used to like schedule your queues and stuff like that. So yeah, basically this should implement our command bus. And let's just add the method steps. So for this, we are just going to do return this bus dispatch, and then we'll pass our command. And then register will just call this bus map, and we can just pass the map here. Okay, but what now? Well, let's create some sort of controller to kind of showcase what we want to build. So let's maybe create like a very simple user controller, for example. So instead of here, I'll just have like an invocable function. And this here we would want to store our user and return it to the API. I just did a typo in the file name, so let's just fix that. Okay, so inside of here, we would want to inject our command bus, not the illuminate one that we just created, but like an interface. And then we would want to delegate some sort of action. So we would want to do something like this, bus dispatch. Oh, right, it needs to be protected in order for this to work. And inside of here, we would want to dispatch our comment. So you can think of comments as generally like things that change the data. And then you can think of queries like things that actually read the data. So what I will do is I will create like a new directory. I'll just call it src, and inside of here I will create a new directory called modules, and here I will create like a new user module, and inside of here let's just create commands and queries, and let's do repositories for this one because it's a hot take, I know, but it's actually nice here. So either way, we want to create something like a create user comment. And this will basically be responsible for passing the data and sending that to our command handler. So we know that this class must extend our empty command because that's what our bus will expect. And inside of here, we can just have like a constructor. And this constructor can accept some data. So let's do like a private read-only string name. And we can add like a getter for it, or we can just make it public since it's read-only, whatever floats your boat. I love getter. For some reason, like it feels nicer in this specific example, but it's obviously whatever. So let's just do name, and maybe let's create like an email. So I will just do like a value objects directory here, and let's just create user email, or just like an email. And here let's just have a public function construct. This will accept a string of email. This can be protected. And we can create like a public static function from. This will get a string of email and return new self with that email. That's like a very simple helper. You can also define like a toNative function here that will just return this email, which will be a string. And inside of our constructor, we can do like filter var email filter validate email, or well, if not filter var, then throw new invalid argument exception, and we can just do like invalid email address provided. Okay, so we have like a very simple value object. And oh, I'm a Dumbo. I forgot to register our new directory in the autoloader. So let's just do modules will be src modules. Now we need to adjust our namespace both here and here. Oops. Okay, so it doesn't work for some reason. Let's just do that manually. So let's do modules, user comments. After so many years, I will still use the wrong slashes. So yeah, here outside of the name, we can also do private read-only email. Let's call that email, and let's add just like add a getter for it. We can compress this entire thing here. Let's do public function get email and just return this email. We don't really need that. All right. So we have our comment. So now inside of our controller, we can simply do new create user comment and just pass our arguments. So we can do name, just do, for educational purposes, let's just do fake name, and our email would be email from fake email. All right, so this looks good. So now let me just create like a very quick route that will hit that controller. So let's just do user controller class. And this does not need the array syntax because it's invocable. So that's great. So let's go to our localhost. And I forgot to start my container. Okay, so we'll get our error that the command bus is not instantiable while building our controller. And there is a very quick fix to that. We just need to go to our app service provider, and inside of the register method, we need to call a singleton because we just want to have a one instance of our command bus, and we need to bind our command bus to our illuminate command bus. This will tell Laravel's dependency injection that whenever you see this, basically replace it with this class. So now if we refresh that, we can see that there is this another error that we are getting, that there is no invoke method in our create user command. And this is basically happening because, by default, Laravel is looking for like a handle method. And if it exists, it will try to execute handle. If not, it will try to execute invoke. And what we need to do is basically make it so the handler, so the dispatcher is not looking for this method in our class that we just dispatched, but in a specific command handler. And the way this happens is, by this method, it's checking if this has a command handler. Basically here, it's just checking if there is, a key in an array, and if there is, it will just use this handler. So we need to define that. And in order to do that, we need to go to our app service provider, and we can do, command bus, command bus equals app command bus, which basically means, Laravel just make me a command bus. Now we can call the register method on it. And what this will allow us to do is create an association between a command and the command handler. So first, we need to create our command handler. Let's create like a base class for that. So let's just do command handler. And in our modules directory, we'll create a new create user command handler. And this will extend our command handler. If we ever need to add some sort of custom class or like custom behavior that should be shared between any command handlers, having this default class will come in very, very handy. And inside of here, we need to create like a public function called handle. As an argument, we are going to get our create user command. And for now, let's just run a DD on that comment. So now here, what we can do is we can do create user command should map to create user command handler. And if we refresh this, we can see that it in fact did map. And now we have this command handler that is responsible for processing this command. And what I will do here is I will create a repository. And this is specifically because, Eloquent is great, but by default, it intermixes saving and reading. And this is precisely what we don't want to do here. So we can do two things here. We can create like a, user repository, and this will be an interface. And like here, you could implement all of your methods. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a read user repository and a write user repository. And this will basically allow me to make sure that there is no separation and that these are self-contained, basically. So now let's just create, maybe let's just call it user repository contract, and this write user repository contract. So instead of here, we can do like a public function create, and this will accept a string of the name and an email. And will return us an ID of this newly created user. All right, so now let's create an actual class that implements this. So let's create write user repository. And here, let's just implement our write user repository contract and add our method. Inside of here, we can simply do, what we can do is simply do return DB table users, or you can use Eloquent for that, whatever you prefer. And we can do insert get ID. And inside of here, we can simply do name equals name. We can do email equals email to native. And we'll need passwords, but let's just do like yeah, it's not really a concern here. I'm just doing this so that default validation doesn't throw us an exception. Okay, so now we'll need to implement those. And now we'll need to bind those to the app container. So if we go to our app service provider, here we can register additional singleton. So this app, singleton, we can do write user contract and write user repository. I will quickly do the same thing for read user repository. This will implement a read user repository contract. And inside of here, we can simply do like a public function find by ID, and it will return an array, or like a DTO or pure eloquent model, whatever you prefer. I'll just go with ID for now, or well, like an object by default. But yeah, with that done, we can now simply bind that. And there is a nicer way to do it. You could simply do like, singletons. I think there is like a default array on this that you could use. But you could simply do something like this. And now we have a very simple for each. We can do this app singleton concrete. We can bind our abstract to our concrete. This will make this entire process much simpler. Okay, so now our read repository should implement this. And, this will be fairly simple. We can just do db table users, where ID is ID, first ID, not int. So with this implemented, we can go back to our create user command handler. And inside of here, we can add our constructor. And this constructor will instantiate a new write user repository. So now we can simply do return this repository, create, and we can just do command get name and command get email. And we can obviously add named arguments for that, so it's a bit more clear what we are passing. All right, so let's just run it again. And we'll get, this error that we didn't run our migrations. Let's just run them and refresh. So now we are getting, a blank screen, which basically means that it was created properly. So this is great. And what's really nice is now we have this very tight separation of concerns. Basically, everything that is happening here is happening at a very small piece of the entire application, which makes it very easy to adjust. Now, it would be very easy to change our connection. So for example, if we have a different database that we would use for our writes, we could simply, do writes here, and this would insert it in the proper place. And our reads, based on some sort of background replication, would get our data. This allows you to do cool things like utilize materialized tables and some sort of cool replication, maybe some sort of caching for your reads that happen behind the scenes to make this whole process much more enjoyable. But let's go back to our user controller. So, we have created our user, but now we need to return it. So how do we do it? Well, great question. So in order to do that, we need to create a new bus. So we'll create a new query bus. And our query bus will be very simple. So it will be an interface. Previously, we don't really want to have any concrete implementations. Let's do public function ask. That's a pattern I read somewhere, like a convention. This could be like query or, whatever. whatever works for you. And inside of here, we would pass a query. So let's just create a query class, and let's pass our query here. And let's use our register method that will get an array of map and then return void. Okay, so now we can easily create our Illuminate query bus. And this can simply implement our query bus. And here, all it will do is basically the same thing as we did before. So let's create a constructor. Let's create a protected dispatcher. Let's call it bus. And inside of here, we can simply do return this bus dispatch and then pass our query. And in the map, we'll just do return this bus map and then pass our map. Let's not return it. So now again, back to our app service provider, we can very simply map our query bus to our Illuminate query bus. And here we'll need to register our bindings again. So instead of calling the command bus, we'll call query bus. And as far as I know, under the hood Laravel will actually use the same dispatcher, which is not a big deal, actually, but just something to keep in mind. And we need to create our queries. So the flow is fairly simple. We just need to do our find user query. That will extend a query. And this will simply have our private or public ID. And then we'll just add a getter for actually retrieving that ID. And we'll create our find user query handler. This will get a protected read-only user read repository. It will have a handle method that will get find user query. Will return an object or a null. And now we can just do this repository find. And I didn't specify the name here. So this would be a query. And here we can do query get ID. And the last thing that we need to do is register that. So let's just do find user query and find user query handler. So here we can quickly do something like a user equals this bus. Just change that to command bus. And let's add our query bus. So we can just do this query bus ask, and we'll ask for a new find user query ID. And yeah, we'll get an ID from here. So let's just return it for now. Normally you would have some sort of mapper that would take care of that. Yes, we can inline that, but that's for later. As you have seen, our create user handler is going to return as an ID. This may be okay for your use case. If you don't want to do that, and you want to take care of like your ID generation on the front end, what you could do is you could like create something like UIDs or ULEADs or whatever, and kind of control that from here. So you could pass that ULEAD here and kind of propagate that from a controller where you'd have some sort of service, ID service that would generate ID for you. And then you would be able to just remove it from here and just find it here. But yeah, let's go back to our actual implementation. And now let's run our codes, and we can see that our user was created. So this way you have this complete separation of reads and writes. Again, this isn't something that you'd probably use in like every single one of your projects, but if that's something like if you want to have a very clean, very detached architecture from any sort of framework, because we are not really using anything Laravel here. Not at this point, not at this point. The only thing that we are doing is at the repository level. That could also be abstracted away if you want to. Okay, so that's it. If you did enjoy the video, please do let me know and see you in the next one.